Chapter 20. Shonda. Shonda tried to swallow her nerves as Deacon pulled up to the hospital for her first day of work. They'd called to tell her she had the job just hours after she'd interviewed 2 days ago, but it still felt surreal. She'd never imagined leaving Baytown, yet here she was about to start a new job in Fire Beach. And while things were going well with Deacon, she would definitely be saving her money so she and Dante could find a place of their own, even if it was only temporary. If she and Deacon were going to last this time, she didn't want to make the same mistake they'd made last time, and it was getting harder every day not to fall into that. "Hey, you're going to do great," he said, placing a hand on her arm. "Yeah, Mom, don't worry," Dante added. "You're the best nurse ever." "Aw, thank you both. That's so sweet." She took a deep breath and opened the door. "Will you still come meet me for lunch?" Deacon grinned and nodded. "We wouldn't miss it for the world. You just let me know what time and we'll be there." "Sounds good. Have fun, you two." She stepped out of the truck and waved to them. Though she was glad Deacon had been able to take the day off to hang out with Dante, she wondered how he would adjust when both she and Deacon were working. They'd toured the school he would be attending a few days ago, and he'd seemed excited, but she still worried about him. He'd had so much turmoil lately in his young life, which was partly why she'd decided to leave him out the rest of this week and just start him on Monday. She just hoped he found friends soon. He hadn't talked about missing Baytown, but she feared that he would soon. Of course, finding friends was also something she needed to do. She hadn't had that many close friends back home, but she'd had a few, and while she had Deacon here, she really wanted to find more. Hopefully, she would meet some people here at the hospital that she could connect with. It was clearly where God wanted her to be at the moment. Though she was still a little nervous, she pulled back her shoulders and stepped through the entrance. Just like the previous 2 times she'd been in this hospital, she felt a sense of peace as she walked through the main area and to the HR offices. "Good morning, Miss Turner," Diane said as she entered the office. Shonda smiled, pleased that the woman seemed to remember her face, even though they'd only met once. "Good morning, Diane. How is your day so far?" "Better than I deserve, so I can't complain." Shonda didn't know Diane well, but she wondered if her sunny optimism was natural or more from habit. "I've got your badge ready for you, and Dr. Young will assign you a locker when you get up there. I'm glad everything worked out with the interview." "Me too, and thank you again for taking a chance on me." Shonda took the badge that Diane held out for her and stared down at the picture. It was her face, but she could still see the fear in her eyes. Would she ever feel completely safe again? There had been no word from Eric for a few days, but Shonda still worried about who she had called that night and if she would do it again. "You're welcome. Have a great day." She thanked Diane and flashed a small smile before heading upstairs to the pediatric unit. Just like at her last hospital, this floor was decorated in bright colors and murals. No kid should be in the hospital, but at least they tried to make the place warm and welcoming. She approached the nurse working the desk and showed her badge. "I'm reporting for work, but it's my first day. I'm supposed to meet with Dr. Young." The woman behind the desk smiled. "Welcome. I'm Renee, and you will just love Dr. Young. He's so good with the kids and sweet. Plus, he's got the faintest accent. I just love to hear him talk." It was clear that Renee had a little crush on Dr. Young, but Shonda just smiled and nodded. Hospital romances weren't exactly sanctioned, but they happened so often that they weren't really frowned upon anymore either, as long as the parties involved could stay professional at work and cordial if they ended things. "Well, I'm sure the kids enjoy it too." "Oh, they do. Have a seat and I'll buzz him to let him know you're here, and welcome to the team. I just know you'll love it here." Like Diane, Renee seemed to bubble with cheerfulness. Was it something in the water, or was this place really one big happy family? She'd barely sat down when the door opened, and a man in a blue lab coat stepped out. While not her type, she could understand Renee's fascination with him. He had dark hair and intense blue eyes, a dimple in his cheek when he smiled, and though his clothes didn't show it, she suspected he was muscular as well. "Shonda Turner?" He held out his hand. "Yes, sir, that's me," she said, taking his hand and injecting as much confidence into the handshake as she could. "Perfect. Let's get you situated so you can get to work. We've been a little behind since losing our last nurse." Shonda nodded. "Happy to help, then. Is she doing okay? I heard about the reason for her absence." Dr. Young shrugged as he led her through the internal door that led to the rest of the pediatric wing. "She's on bed rest due to her amniotic fluid being so low, but they're monitoring her and everything should be fine." "Oh, that's so good to hear." "Indeed." He stopped in front of a small break room that held little more than a table with chairs, a sink, a few fridges, and a couple of microwaves. "This is the break room. You're welcome to eat in here or down at the cafeteria. Feel free to use the fridges, but be sure to label anything you don't want eaten. We're pretty good about only eating what we bring, but every once in a while someone forgets and hunger strikes." She smiled. "I know all about that, sir. I'll be sure to have my name on anything I bring." "Wonderful." He continued to the next room. "In here are the bathrooms, showers, and lockers. You're free to use these at any time." He stepped inside and took her back to the locker area. "I've got number 113 cleaned out for you. Did you bring a lock with you?" "I did." She had to run to the hardware store on her way here because she hadn't had time to grab her lock from her old job, but she was good to go now. "Perfect." He gave her a moment to stash her things and then continued the tour. "Here's where you'll be stationed. You probably met Yolanda when you interviewed." He pointed to the pretty black woman who'd felt like an instant friend to Shonda when they'd met. She hoped the other woman felt the same way. "I did. Good to see you again, Yolanda." "You too, girl. Glad you're here. I'll take it from here, boss." Dr. Young nodded and then grabbed a chart before heading off to check on a patient. "Most of this probably won't be new to you since you've done this before, but I'll walk you through anything you need in our computer system. Otherwise, you're shadowing me today with patients. Tomorrow, you'll be on your own." "Sounds perfect. Thank you." Shonda followed Yolanda through all the rounds. Though the hospital did a few things differently than her last place, most of it was the same, and she found herself itching to help the clients on her own. "Don't worry, you'll get your chance," Yolanda said, picking up on Shonda's eagerness as they returned to the desk after checking on a sweet young girl. Her smile faltered as her eyes locked on to something behind Shonda. She turned, expecting to see a patient out of their room, or someone destroying the hall or something. Instead, she found Renee sauntering their direction. Renee barely even looked at them as she breezed past, hips swaying side to side. But the air immediately around Yolanda seemed to drop 10 degrees. It was clear her friend didn't like the other woman for some reason. "You want to tell me what that was about?" Shonda asked, when Renee disappeared down the hallway. Yolanda pressed her lips together and then shook her head. "It's nothing. Don't worry about it." She glanced down at her wrist and then smiled. "Looks like it's time for lunch. Aren't you meeting your man?" Shonda wanted to ask more questions, but her stomach chose that moment to let out a low rumble, reminding her that she hadn't eaten in a few hours. Plus, Deacon and Dante would be waiting for her. Whatever was going on with Renee could be addressed later. "Yes, and my son. Back in half an hour?" Take 45 minutes, girl. We're not that busy, and it's your first day. Thank you. I'll be back soon. As Shonda made her way toward the cafeteria, the rumblings in her stomach grew more pronounced. Thankfully, the cafeteria didn't look especially busy, and they were already at a table when she entered. Dante spotted her first and waved his little arm to grab her attention. Smiling, she headed that direction and slid into one of the open chairs. "How's your first day going?" Deacon asked as she picked up the menu. "Good. Busy, but good. I hadn't realized how much I miss helping kids, but it feels good to be back at it. What have you guys been up to?" "Mr. Deacon took me to the coolest park. It has this huge slide where you have to climb lots of stairs to get to the top. It was a little scary at first, but once I went down it, I wasn't scared anymore, so I went down a lot." She smiled at Dante. "That sounds fun." Her eyes shifted to Deacon and her eyebrow lifted just slightly. "It's safe, right?" "Completely," he said with a grin. "If you know what you want, I'll go place the order." "Yeah, I think I'll take the pesto chicken today." "Great. Be right back." As Deacon headed off to place the order, Shonda turned to Dante, eager to hear more about this adventurous park they'd gone to. "So, tell me more about the park. What else did you do?" Dante scrunched up his nose and thought for a moment before speaking. "Well, there were some cool ninja warrior type activities. There was a rope ladder walk that was fun and a rock wall that I climbed easily. But I'm not very good at the monkey bars yet," he said, his mouth turning down into a slight frown. Shonda smiled and reached over to pat him on the back comfortingly. "I never was either, honey, but it sounds like you had fun." "I did." He pressed his lips together, and she could tell there was something else on his mind. "What is it? Did something happen?" Though she didn't want them to and didn't believe them for a minute, images of Deacon not watching him and him getting hurt flew through her mind. Dante shook his head. "No, nothing like that. I was just—" He paused again before taking a deep breath. "I was just wondering if I could call Mr. Deacon Dad." "Oh." She didn't know why that question threw her off guard. She should have known it would be coming soon. What kid wants to call their father Mr. Anything? And they had been spending a lot of time together. But it still felt fast. "I really want to call him Dad, but I didn't know if it would hurt your feelings, and I didn't want to do that." Those words broke Shonda's heart. How could she even think of telling him no? It didn't matter how long Dante had known Deacon. The man was his father, and he was a good man, a man she hoped to spend her life with. Denying Dante the right to call him Dad would be nothing more than trying to soothe her jealousy. She placed a hand on his arm. "I think if you're ready to call him Dad, then you should." Immediately, Dante's posture brightened and his eyes lit up, letting her know she'd made the right decision. "Really? You'd be okay with it?" "Of course. I happen to hope your father will be in our lives for many years to come." "Cool. Thanks, Mom. You're the best." Deacon returned at that moment and slid back into his chair. "What did I miss?" Shonda glanced over at Dante. "Well, Dante was just telling me about all the activities at the park. I'd love to check it out myself sometime, but I think he has something he wants to say too." Deacon turned his attention to Dante. "Oh yeah? What's that?" Dante looked down at his hands and chewed on his lip for a minute before meeting Deacon's eyes. "I was wondering if you'd be okay with me calling you Dad." "Be okay with it? Are you kidding? I would love it." "Cool. Thanks, Dad." As Deacon beamed and Dante's smile grew to match, Shonda felt that little seed of ugly jealousy try to rear its head again. This was what she'd always wanted for her son, and Deacon had missed so much, as had Dante growing up without his dad around. She would not ruin this for them. "Maybe next time we can all go to the park together?" Shonda offered, as she watched the two men in her life bond in a way she would never understand. Deacon turned to her then and nodded. "Absolutely. It will be even better when we're all together." It was clear that he understood what she was feeling, and she was grateful that he was including her. "So, what do you two have planned for the rest of the day?" "Mr. Deacon, Dad," Dante grinned up at him, "said he'd play Mario with me." "Ah, well, did you tell him how good you are?" She'd played with Dante a few times, and it always amazed her how dexterous he was. She supposed it was because he grew up with computers. "He did, but I still think I have a shot," Deacon said, smiling at Dante. Just then the waitress came with their lunch orders, and conversation shifted away from the park as they dug into their food. It was only a momentary reprieve from the constant worry that nagged at Shonda, but she reminded herself to enjoy it before she had to let them both go and trust that they would all be okay.